Hi everybody, welcome for this interview, HIT, High Impact Clinical Trials 2. I am Dr. Manjusha Yadla, Deputy Chair, now going to become Chair of the social media team of International Society of Nephrology, and it's my privilege to welcome the esteemed guest of today's interview, Professor Adeera Levin. She doesn't need introduction, but however, it's my privilege to introduce Professor Adeera Levin. So she's the past president of ISN and the recipient of 2024 Jane Hamburger Award. She's Professor of Medicine and Head of Nephrology at the University of British Columbia. She also serves as Executive Director of BC Renal, overseeing Kidney Services British Columbia, and leads the post-COVID-19 interdisciplinary clinical network, a founding member of the Crescent organization. She's a prominent figure in kidney education and research globally. Welcome, Professor Adeera Levin. It's glad and I'm privileged to interview you today. So can I start my question specifically focusing on paradigm? Okay.
Sure.
So could you briefly describe what this paradigm meeting was about, which was conducted in November 2024, recently, about 2 to 3 months back? Can you just give the oversight view of this
Sure.
paradigm meeting?
Yeah, so the concept was that we would try to bring people together from across the world that were patient partners, as well as clinicians, researchers, regulators, and industry scientists. And the notion was that in a very quickly changing world of kidney disease research, with therapeutics and diagnostics and everything else, could we put together a roadmap that would help the clinical community in particular understand where we're going and how quickly we need to move, and how to integrate 4 very important components. One being patient-reported outcomes, the other one being novel trial designs, and alternative trial designs to be more inclusive and diverse, which I know is a question coming up. The third one is to stop focusing on single laboratory measurements for targets and thresholds, because that's led us astray. And the last one is how to, in the context of new therapies, develop hierarchical composite endpoints that would help both patients and regulators have a better understanding of the true value of a clinical trial going forward. And so this was to delineate a roadmap to get us there.
So just extending that question, so how do you make a patient or a caretaker understand the trends of the values, the trends and the changes of the lab values, or probably make them get involved in the clinical trials? How do we do that? What is your vision about that?
So the notion is obviously the more people understand about their disease and everything, but also to individualize it. So for those of us that are younger women or older women, or younger men or older men, like, our lab tests aren't static, and we need to understand that. So, and then entry into clinical trials needs also to appreciate that having one threshold will exclude many
Yes.
people. And so if one understands the dynamics of the biology, then we'll understand better, both for patient care as well as for designing trials, how better to include people.
So how to do that? Is it that we plan to bring certain toolkits, we plan to bring certain modules? Is it that how do we approach the patient? Because the patient group appears to be diverse, with diverse cultures and diverse languages. So how do we do that? What's the perspective from the ISN point of view as to be the inclusive for the patients in the clinical trials from this angle, whatever you mentioned till now?
So creating not just toolkits, but understanding that you can have a platform trial or an adaptive trial that says that these are the people who should be included. But in India, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, they will have different entry criteria
Correct.
than in North America. That doesn't invalidate, but rather
Right.
actually makes the clinical trial that much more accessible. And whether it's enrollment criteria or necessity for certain number of study visits, there are different ways that we can adapt. It's still in its infancy, but I think that's the concept, and it will help to engage both clinicians, people living with disease, but also regulators and trial design people.
Right. So I understand we have a long way to go, but I'm sure we're going to have a successful path that's created and niche created by you. So moving on to the next question, how did this program help physicians deliver an effective patient care?
So the more the clinical trials represent the people in front of you, the more you're likely to implement the design. And if you look currently, although the studies are large numbers and they're they've been very well done, if you look, they're 63 to 71-year-old white males that are in most of the studies. And so we really need, and so some physicians will say, well, my patient population wasn't involved, therefore I can't apply this therapy. So that's how we're hoping that being more inclusive in the trials and also showing people that things are more similar than they are different in these different patient groups, and perhaps that will help people implement.
A very crucial point that you have brought about. This will make the physicians also feel more friendly towards the procedures that are being done, that it is more similar than different. So how do we have strategies towards this to enable physicians to think in those lines of understanding?
So a lot of it is something that you're much better at than I, which is social media awareness, making sure the concepts aren't like very erudite and able to be accessed by everybody. So, is a 15-year-old more similar to a 30-year-old than an 85-year-old? Probably.
Yes.
So why don't we include 15-year-olds in our studies?
As well,
That
yes.
kind of thinking.
Yes. Coming to the 15-year-old, so how do you look at the specific groups involvement? Let's say children, let's say pregnant women are getting involved.
Yeah.
Then there is another group that is particularly vulnerable groups, a disadvantaged population. So how do we bring all these people into the clinical trials? I'm sure the future is there for those particular groups, but then though it's a tough path and challenging for us, but then inclusion of them is imperative for us. So how do you foresee that point?
So I don't have an easy solution.
Right.
It goes back to the simpler you make the trial, the more you also ethically can't offer people to be in a trial if the drug won't be available to them afterwards. And so there is
Right.
going to always be this tension. But already we have studies that have many more people from Malaysia, the Philippines, India. So we're starting. It won't be
Right.
perfect, but I think over time. Children, as you know, is not one group of people. There's neonates, there's young kids, and then we think that for sure including people that are post-puberty
Yes.
is going to be much easier than
Right.
excluding them. And I think the FDA and other groups are responsive to this concept of sufficiently similar to an
Right.
adult that you can include them in the trial. So that's going to be quite an exciting moment.
Is there any definition for the sufficiently similar, or is it that
There
we
is,
take
the
it?
FDA has some, I don't know it off the
Definitive.
top of my head, they have some way to say if something is sufficiently similar.
Right.
So there's many people working on this, that would at least include, the post-puberty kids in the
Right,
studies, which
understood.
is going to be a big improvement. We still have to deal with the younger ones. Pregnant women are always going to be an issue. I think if there are conditions that we're studying particular to pregnancy, that's easier. I think the whole notion of the extra contraception that excludes women from being in
Yes.
trials is hugely problematic, and I think lots of people are trying to work on that.
So I'm sure that's going to be an extremely challenging area for us, the inclusion of the pregnant women. So moving on. So it's acknowledged that industry partners' involvement in clinical trials should be more patient-focused. What role do you think vulnerable groups will have in clinical trials? And I asked this question. So is it necessary that we should alter the design of the clinical trial when we are including the vulnerable groups? Let's say for pregnant women, let's say the sufficiently similar children, or probably the particularly disadvantaged groups. Do you think there should be any design for inclusivity principle?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, the way that we've been designing some of the studies with the Oxford group is simple, like you reduce the number of study visits. I think regulators
Right.
need, you could have a large trial that's very inclusive and a subgroup can have many more visits, but then to include women and children, they can't miss school, they can't miss caretaking. So do they really need to come for 8 study visits? Could you do 4? Can you do them virtually? Can you do them with smartphones? Like there's many things that we need to
Device,
do
yes.
that will allow people to be included. And I think in terms of industry partners, I think they need to be convinced that there isn't such a thing as a professional patient, but rather the patients helping them to design the studies. And perhaps, like HIV did, the promise that you can have the medicines for a very affordable price in certain countries if you participate in the trial.
Right.
Might be like this country would get it at a lower price, but the patients would then have a different incentive to be in the trial. Awful
Right.
to be in a study if you can't use the drug.
So reaching out to the patient is definitely a crucial strategy for you, because especially when they are especially the vulnerable groups and all. So having the soft were component in that, using the devices to reach them out, and of course making a house visit with the help of the field workers. All these things probably will enable us to reach them, not they reaching out to the industrialists or to us, we reaching out to them, so that we have an adequate information.
Yes.
Probably that's going to change our reach, and of course the spread of the word by mouth is going to enable them to be more involved in the clinical trials.
And if you think about what HIV did and what other groups did, is the patients came to the studies. The studies didn't try and find the patients. Right. So that's part of the whole balance. Is like, if you know you have an impaired kidney function, then you come and say, oh, look, there's a study that I could be in. That would be much more exciting than, I wonder who can be in it. So I think that's part of the paradigm shift.
Yes, absolutely. So moving on, what potential advantages might shared decision making in clinical trials offer, and how do you see them being put into practice?
So they're very pertinent to these adaptive trial platforms, to know that your contribution to the trial will be there no matter what. And that's part of the hierarchical composite endpoint discussion, is that everybody contributes to one of the outcomes, even if you didn't end up on dialysis. So that's important. So the fact that your data will contribute. I think the shared decision making about how important is it for us to fix this number, or how important is it for us to fix the symptoms that you have, is really important to help design trials that are pertinent to patients that they want to be involved in. So that's part of how this shared decision making about what's important to them, what can we do, what can't we do, and then how do we make sure that all of their data counts towards the outcome.
Right. So, I mean, as we have a long way to go, do you foresee a roadmap that can be given for all the kidney stakeholders as far as the clinical trials are concerned? Came to know that it will be done in 2025. That's what the website says. So, are there any recommendations that are going to come up shortly, or probably do you have a visualized or laid down roadmap for the development of the same?
Well, I mean, if you think so, during the conference, we made it's a little puzzle, and there's 4 pieces, and there's not one piece that's more important than the other, and they all have to be developed simultaneously. Roadmaps usually imply that you've got a first, a second, and a third, and I might wonder whether or not this is iterative, and it's a bit circular. So if patient voice is prevalent and we have good patient-reported outcome measures, then we'll be able to design studies that are relevant. If they're relevant and the hierarchical composite endpoint includes a patient-reported outcome, the uptake of the treatment may be that much more easy. And then if we design novel trials, N of 1, basket trials, platform, then we'll be able to include more people. So all of those things work together. But first is the socialization of those concepts to everyone. Then is the increasing the rigor of some of those things. And then it's showing in real time that they're actually working. So it's this kind of rotating roadmap, if you will. But starting with, awareness and socializing the concepts that it's too important for kidney health to exclude too many people from the trials, and we need to do more and more trials. Therefore, how do we actually change the entire culture?
What's the anticipated time of the recommendations that are going to come?
Well, the first publication we're gonna try and get it done. We're working on the first manuscript now, so that should be done in the next month or so.
Great.
So in the first half of 2025, you should see something, signposting, so to speak, and then we'll develop some additional tools.
Great, excellent. So thank you so much for being here with us and for sharing your invaluable insights, and then information to us. And of course, your pioneering work and dedication in the field of nephrology has had a profound impact on the field. And we are truly grateful for the opportunity to learn from you. And I'm sure the publications and the manuscripts that are going to come out in 2025 are going to be useful to the society from a pertinent point of view as far as the patients are concerned. And of course, as far as the kidney disease understanding is concerned. And finally, we are focusing on the patient empowerment and betterment as far as the kidney diseases are concerned. I'm sure it's going to add to us, and definitely we appreciate your time for being here, and thank you for the incredible contributions. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.